The Tycoon and the Maid, a forbidden love unveiled, hit ready for a surprising love story that will touch your heart. Let us know in the comments where you're watching this video from and be a part of this special moment. A hidden longing. Blackwood Manor stood imperious on the hilltop, its glass windows reflecting the late afternoon sun like golden mirrors. Lily Summers ascended the marble staircase, a silver tray with afternoon tea in her hands. Her steps were silent, calculated. 3 years of working in that house had taught her how to be invisible. Edward Thorne was in his study, poring over contracts that would decide the future of hundreds of employees. He was known in the business world as the Ice Emperor, ruthless, cold, incapable of showing any emotion. But Lily knew a secret no one else did. Behind those emerald eyes was a wounded man, scarred by his mother's abandonment when he was just 8 years old. "Your tea, Mr. Thorne," she murmured, placing the tray on the table. Edward looked up from his papers, and for a moment, his masks fell. His gaze lingered on Lily's delicate face, on her dark hair, simply tied back, on the way she looked when she was nervous. "Lily." His voice came out huskier than he intended. "Yes, sir." Close the door. Her heart pounded. In recent months, these encounters had become more frequent. Glances that lasted longer than they should. Accidental touches that left their skin burning. Conversations that happened only between them. She closed the door with trembling hands. When she turned, Edward was standing, walking towards her with slow steps, like a predator circling its prey. "We can't go on like this," he said, stopping mere inches from her. "I know," she whispered, but her body betrayed her words, leaning imperceptibly towards him. "You have no idea what you do to me." Edward raised a hand, lightly touching her face. 3 years. 3 years seeing you every day, pretending I feel nothing." Lily closed her eyes, allowing herself, for a moment, to forget the social differences that separated them. Edward was a billionaire, heir to a business empire. She was just a housekeeper, the daughter of a laundress who had died when Lily was 16. "Mr. Thorne, I'm—" "Edward." He interrupted her. "When we're alone, I'm just Edward." "Edward." She repeated his name like a prayer. "This is madness. If they find out—" "No one will find out." He leaned closer, his lips almost touching hers. "I need you, Lily. You're the only person who makes me feel alive." Before she could respond, Edward kissed her. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was desperate, hungry, as if he were drowning and she was his only breath of air. Lily surrendered completely, wrapping her arms around his neck, allowing all the months of repressed desire to explode in that moment. When they broke apart, both were breathless. "This can't happen," she said, but her hand still clutched his shirt. "It already happened," Edward murmured against her lips, "and it will happen again." At that moment, the phone rang, cutting the tension like a blade. Edward answered reluctantly, and Lily took advantage of the distraction to compose herself, smoothing her uniform and tying back her loosened hair. "Yes, Mother," Edward said into the phone, his voice returning to its cold, professional tone. "Tomorrow night? Of course, I'll be there." Lily felt her heart sink. Edward's mother, Eleanor Thorne, only called when there was an important social event. And social events meant one thing: other women, from the appropriate social class for the Thorne heir. "There's a charity dinner tomorrow," Edward said after hanging up, avoiding her gaze. "My mother insists I go." "Of course," Lily forced a smile. "It's your world, Edward. I understand." "Lily, I need to go. Mrs. Thorne will be here soon, and she doesn't like things out of order." She moved towards the door, but Edward caught her arm. "This changes nothing between us," he said intensely. "It doesn't change?" She looked at him with sadness. "Edward, you're going to a dinner where you'll meet women who can be introduced to your family. Women who can marry you without causing a scandal. That changes everything. I don't want any of them. I want you." For how long? The question came out as a painful whisper. How long will you be able to hide what you feel? How long will I be able to pretend I'm not in love with my employer? Edward fell silent. He knew she was right, but he couldn't find an answer that wouldn't hurt them both. I need time to think, he finally said, and I need to protect my heart. Lily opened the door. Good night, Mr. Thorne. She left, leaving Edward alone in his study, with the bitter taste of reality. What would you do in Lily's position? Would you fight for this love, or walk away to protect yourself? Share your thoughts in the comments. A mother's shadow. Outside, Lily leaned against the wall, pressing her hand against her chest, as if she could calm her wildly beating heart. For the first time in 3 years, she considered quitting. But how could she leave the only job that gave her stability? How could she abandon the man who unknowingly had become the center of her world? That night, Edward stayed awake late, looking out his bedroom window. 3 floors below, the light in the staff quarters was still on. He knew Lily couldn't sleep either. In the small room she shared with 2 other maids, Lily stared at the ceiling, a silent tear rolling down her face. She knew she had crossed a line from which there would be no return. Tomorrow, Edward would go to the dinner. He would meet someone suitable for his social position, and she would again be just an invisible employee. But what she didn't know was that Edward had made a decision. He wouldn't go to the dinner. For her, he was willing to face his mother's wrath and society's expectations. At least, that's what he thought at that moment. Fate, however, had other plans for them both. The next day dawned gray, as if the sky itself reflected the tension hanging over Blackwood Manor. Lily woke up with swollen eyes, having slept only 2 hours. Her roommates, Maria and Joanna, had already left for their duties, leaving her alone with her torturous thoughts. At 7 in the morning, she went down to the kitchen to prepare Edward's breakfast. Mrs. Davies, the head cook, watched her with a worried look. "Girl, you look awful. Didn't you sleep well?" "Just a bit of a headache," Lily lied, focusing on arranging the toast on the plate exactly how Edward liked it. "Be careful not to step on Mrs. Thorne's toes today. She arrived last night sourer than a green lemon." Lily's heart tightened. Eleanor Thorne was a 60-year-old woman, elegant and ruthless, who treated employees like furniture. She had always been suspicious of Lily, especially after she noticed how Edward sometimes watched her. Lily went up to the study, as she did every morning, but this time her hands trembled as she held the tray. The door was ajar, and she could hear voices coming from inside. "Edward, you cannot disappoint me like this," Eleanor's shrill voice. "Isabella Harding will be at the dinner tonight. She's perfect for you." "Mother, I already told you I'm not going." Edward's voice sounded tired, but firm. "And may I know the reason for this stubbornness? You are 32 years old. You need to get married and give me grandchildren. Isabella comes from a traditional family. She is educated, beautiful, and cold as an iceberg." Edward interrupted her. "Just like all the others you introduced me to." Lily hesitated at the door. "Should I come back later?" But before she could decide, Eleanor saw her. "Come in, girl, and next time, knock before standing there like a statue." Lily entered, keeping her eyes down. Edward was sitting behind his desk, his hair disheveled, as if he had run his hands through it many times. When their eyes met for a second, she saw a mix of apology and determination in his green eyes. "Leave the tea here and leave," Eleanor ordered. "Good order." "Actually," Edward stood up, "I would like Lily to organize my papers today. I have an important presentation tomorrow." Eleanor narrowed her eyes, but said nothing. She left the study with heavy steps, leaving a trail of expensive perfume and tension. As soon as they were alone, Edward walked to Lily. "I'm not going to the dinner," he said without preamble. "Edward, no, don't do this for me," she whispered, still organizing papers with trembling hands. "It's not just for you. It's for me too." He held her hands, forcing her to look at him. "For the first time in years, I know what I want. And what I want is you." "And then?" she asked, tears welling in her eyes. "Even if your mother accepts, even if society doesn't condemn us, can you imagine a life with me? I barely finished high school, Edward. I don't know how to discuss art or politics. I don't know how to behave at elegant dinners. Do you think that matters to me?" "It should matter," she pulled away from him, "because when the passion fades, when the novelty wears off, you'll look at me and see only a housekeeper who doesn't belong in your world." Edward was silent for a moment, her words hitting his deepest insecurities. He knew she was partly right. His mother would never accept it. Society would judge them. And he himself sometimes wondered if what he felt was real or just forbidden desire. "So that's it?" he asked, his voice full of pain. "You've already decided it can't work?" "I've decided I can't keep hurting myself," she replied, wiping her tears. "Edward, please, go to the dinner, meet Isabella, give a normal life a chance." At that moment, the door burst open. Eleanor stormed in like a hurricane, followed by a young, elegant blonde who could only be Isabella Harding. "Edward, darling," Isabella approached with a perfect smile, completely ignoring Lily's presence. "Your mother told me you're not feeling well. I came personally to invite you to dinner." Lily flinched, trying to make herself invisible. But Eleanor wouldn't let the opportunity pass. "Maid, leave. Don't you see we're having an important conversation?" Eleanor's disdainful tone made Edward clench his fists. He looked at Lily, who kept her head down, and then at Isabella, who watched him with calculated interest. "Of course, Isabella," he finally said, his voice colder than he intended. "It would be a pleasure to accompany you to dinner." Lily felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. Without raising her eyes, she murmured an excuse and quickly left the study. "Perfect," Eleanor exclaimed. "Isabella, darling, I'm sure you two will get along wonderfully." Edward barely heard the rest of the conversation. His mind was with Lily, imagining the pain she must be feeling. But maybe she was right. Maybe it was better this way. Do you think Edward made the right choice by agreeing to go to dinner? What would you have done if you were him? Let us know in the comments below. A silent farewell. That night, Lily watched from the staff quarters window as Edward left dressed in a tuxedo, impeccable and distant. Isabella waited for him at the entrance, stunning in a blue dress that cost more than Lily earned in 6 months. "What a beautiful couple," commented Maria, who had joined her at the window. "Yes," Lily agreed, swallowing the pain. "They match perfectly." The dinner was a success from a social point of view. Isabella proved intelligent, charming, and interested in the family business. Edward played his part by being courteous and attentive, but his mind was miles away. "You're very quiet tonight," Isabella commented as they danced. "Sorry, work matters," he lied. "Your mother told me you're very dedicated to business. I admire that in a man." She moved closer to him. "Perhaps we can get to know each other better. How about dinner alone tomorrow?" Edward was about to refuse when he saw his mother watching them with a triumphant smile. All expectations, all social pressure, all logic said he should accept. "It would be a pleasure," he heard himself reply. Isabella smiled victoriously, and Edward felt as if he was signing his own death warrant. Meanwhile, at the manor, Lily cried silently into her pillow. She had made a decision. The next morning, she would resign. She couldn't bear to see Edward building a new life with another woman. When Edward returned from dinner, it was past midnight. He went straight to his room, but stopped at the window that overlooked the staff quarters. Lily's light was off. He didn't know that. 3 floors below, she was awake, staring at the ceiling, and wondering how her heart could hurt so much without literally breaking into pieces. The next day, Lily knocked on Edward's study door with a resignation letter in her hand. But when she entered, she found something that would change everything. Edward was on the phone, and she clearly heard him setting up another meeting with Isabella. "Today at 8? Perfect. I'm looking forward to getting to know you better," he was saying. Without noticing Lily had entered, she left the letter on the desk and walked out without a word. Edward only saw the letter after hanging up the phone. When he opened it and read its content, he felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath his feet. He ran after her, but Lily had already left the manor, carrying only a small suitcase with her belongings. She left no address, said goodbye to no one. She simply vanished from Edward Thorne's life as if she had never existed. What neither of them knew was that on that very same day, a tiny life began to form in Lily's womb. A secret she would carry with her, and that would change both their lives forever. A secret life, a lingering hope. 3 weeks had passed since Lily disappeared from Blackwood Manor. Edward desperately tried to find her. He hired detectives, searched every poor neighborhood in the city, asked every acquaintance of hers. Nothing. It was as if she had evaporated. Isabella, in turn, interpreted Edward's distant behavior as a mysterious charm. They had gone out together 5 times, and she was already mentally planning the wedding that would be the union of the century between 2 powerful families. Lily had taken refuge in a small boarding house in the city center, a place where no one asked questions, and where she could completely disappear. She was using her savings to survive while looking for a job, but her search was being hampered by something she still didn't fully comprehend. Every morning, she woke up with terrible nausea. At first, she thought it was stress or sadness, but when she realized her period was 3 weeks late, a terrible suspicion began to form in her mind. "No, no, no," she murmured to herself, pacing nervously around the small room. "This can't be happening." But the signs were unequivocal. Morning sickness, breast tenderness, extreme fatigue, and now the delay. Lily knew she needed to be sure, but she was terrified of the possibility. That afternoon, she mustered enough courage to go to a distant pharmacy where no one knew her. She bought a pregnancy test with trembling hands and returned to the boarding house as if carrying a bomb about to explode. In the tiny bathroom she shared with other guests, Lily took the test. The 3-minute wait was the longest of her life. When she saw the 2 pink lines on the display, her legs weakened, and she had to lean on the sink to keep from falling. "My God," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "I'm pregnant. Pregnant with Edward Thorne's child. Pregnant with the man who was now dating a socialite who probably didn't even remember her. Pregnant and alone. No family, no money, no prospects." Meanwhile, Edward was in his office trying to concentrate on a presentation, but his mind constantly wandered to Lily. 3 weeks with no clue. Where was she? Was she safe? Was she okay? "Edward?" Isabella's voice brought him back to reality. She had entered without knocking, as if she already owned the place. "Isabella, what are you doing here?" "I came to pick you up for lunch, don't you remember? We agreed yesterday." Edward didn't remember, but he nodded. In the past few days, he felt as if he was living on autopilot, fulfilling social engagements without any real enthusiasm. During lunch at an expensive restaurant, Isabella chattered about the wedding preparations for a friend, making subtle comments about how wonderful it would be if they also got married soon. Edward barely listened, moving the food around his plate without appetite. "Edward, are you listening to me?" Isabella asked, irritated. "Sorry, I'm worried about business. You've been distant lately. Has something happened?" Edward looked at her. Beautiful, elegant, perfect in every aspect that society considered important. But when he looked at her, he felt nothing. No passion, no connection, no desire to share his innermost thoughts. "Isabella, I need to be honest with you," he began. "Oh, good. I also have something important to tell you." She leaned forward, her eyes sparkling. My mother is already talking to yours about the possibility of announcing our engagement at next month's charity ball. Edward felt as if a 1,000-pound weight had fallen on his shoulders. Isabella, I don't know if I'm ready for that. Of course you are. She laughed as if he had made a joke. Edward, we're perfect for each other. Our families have known each other for decades. We have the same education, the same values. It's like destiny. Destiny. The word echoed in Edward's mind. Was it really destiny? Or was it just social convention disguised as love? A desperate choice. That same afternoon, Lily was sitting on the boarding house bed, staring at the pregnancy test as if it could change its result. She had to make a decision. Tell Edward. But how? He was with Isabella now, building a new life. She would appear in his life like a ghost from the past, pregnant and desperate. Her savings were running out. She needed a job. But who would hire a pregnant housekeeper? And when the baby was born, how would she support him alone? For a terrifying moment, she considered looking for Edward. But then she remembered how Eleanor treated her, the contempt in the woman's eyes, the humiliation she would feel begging for help from the man who had abandoned her. No, she said aloud, an iron determination taking hold of her heart. I will not be an obligation in his life. I will not ruin his perfect future with Isabella. That night, Lily made the most difficult decision of her life. She would leave the city. She would go far away where no one knew her, where she could raise her child away from judgments and complications. She had a distant cousin in a rural town who might be able to help her. Edward, meanwhile, was in his room, looking out the window at the staff room that had remained empty since Lily left. Mrs. Davies had casually mentioned that a new maid would start next week, and Edward felt as if they were erasing the last traces of Lily's presence in his life. The next morning, Lily packed her suitcase, the same small suitcase she had arrived at the boarding house with. Inside, besides her few clothes, was the pregnancy test. She didn't know why she kept it, perhaps as proof that all this wasn't just a nightmare. Before leaving for the bus station, she made an impulsive decision. She wrote a letter, not to Edward, but to herself, to the future. A letter explaining her decision, her reasons, her fears. She sealed the envelope and placed it at the bottom of her suitcase, along with a photo she had secretly taken of Edward in the manor garden, at a moment when he was smiling at the flowers. My son will know his father, she murmured, instinctively touching her still flat belly, even if only through a photo. The bus left Willow Creek at 2 p.m, carrying Lily and the secret she held far from the city, where she had discovered love and pain in equal measure. Through the blurred window, she watched the skyline disappear and cried silently for everything she was leaving behind. Edward, who had decided that very day to end his relationship with Isabella, never knew that the love of his life was only a few miles away, taking with her the only chance for true happiness he could have. In Lily's luggage, besides the pregnancy test and the photo, there was something else. A blank birth certificate she had picked up at the registry office, where she had already chosen the child's name. If it was a boy, he would be named Liam, in honor of a saint known as a protector of women in labor. She couldn't imagine that years later, this same name would be the link that would reconnect two lives that destiny insisted on intertwining, even when everything seemed lost forever. 5 years later, echoes of the past. Willow Creek, 5 years later. The city had changed a lot in 5 years, but Edward Thorne's heart remained the same, empty and cold like an abandoned house. He had become even more successful in business, expanding the family empire to other countries. But professional success couldn't fill the hole Lily had left in his life. Isabella was still in his life, more persistent than ever. They had been officially engaged for 2 years, a decision Edward made more out of exhaustion than love. His mother's constant pressure, social expectations, and Isabella herself had simply worn him down. It was easier to say yes than to keep resisting. "Edward, darling, we need to decide on the reception menu," Isabella said, entering his office with a pile of catalogs. "Chef Antoine has been waiting for our answer for 2 weeks." Edward looked up from the documents he was signing, observing his fiancée. Isabella was more beautiful than ever. Perfectly styled blonde hair, impeccable makeup, a dress that probably cost more than many people earned in a year. But when he looked at her, he still felt nothing. "You choose," he said, returning to his papers. "You have good taste for these things." "But it's our wedding, Edward." She approached, resting her hands on the desk. "Sometimes I get the impression you don't care." "Of course I care," he lied automatically. "Then show it!" Isabella exploded, losing the elegant composure she always maintained. "The wedding is in 3 months, yet you act like it's a business appointment." Edward finally stopped writing and looked at her. For a moment, he thought about being honest, about admitting that it was exactly that, a business appointment, a convenient union between two powerful families. But the words died in his throat. "You're right," he said, standing up. "Sorry, I'm under a lot of pressure at work." Isabella smiled, satisfied that she had gotten his attention. "How about we go out to dinner tonight? Just us, no phones, no work, okay?" Meanwhile, 300 miles from Willow Creek, in the small town of Cedar Falls, Lily Evans watched her 4-year-old son playing in the small garden of the house they rented. Liam was a beautiful child, with curly brown hair and intense green eyes that were an exact copy of Edward's. "Mommy, look what I drew!" Liam ran to her, holding a paper with a colorful drawing. "How beautiful, my love." Lily knelt to be at her son's height. "Tell me what it is." "It's you, me, and my daddy." He pointed to the 3 disproportionate figures on the paper. Lily's heart constricted. Liam was at the age of asking many questions about his father, and she always answered with half-truths, saying that Daddy lived far away, and that maybe one day they would meet. "And where is Daddy?" she asked softly. "Here in my heart." Liam patted his chest with his little hand. "Grandma Carmen said that the people we love are always in our heart, even when they're not close." Lily smiled, but tears threatened to well in her eyes. Carmen was her cousin who had taken her in when she arrived in town, pregnant and desperate. She was a simple, wise woman who helped Lily raise Liam with much love. "That's true, my love. Now go play a little more while I finish making lunch." Lily worked as a seamstress in a small garment factory in town. The salary was low, but enough to support herself and Liam with dignity. She had adamantly refused to accept any help other than through her own work. A fleeting glimpse. That same afternoon in Willow Creek, Edward was in his car, returning from a meeting when something unexpected happened. Traffic was stopped on Oakwood Avenue, and he was staring distractedly out the window when he saw a small child running between cars, chasing a ball that had escaped his hands. The boy had curly brown hair, and something about his face made Edward's heart skip a beat. For an impossible moment, he thought he saw Lily in the child's features. But when a woman ran after the boy and picked him up, Edward saw it was just his imagination. The woman didn't resemble Lily at all. "Strange," he murmured to himself. "Why did I think of her?" In the past 5 years, Edward had tried not to think of Lily. He had burned the photos he had of her, donated all the gifts he had bought, but never given, and avoided Iptol at any place that could bring back memories. But sometimes, like now, she appeared in his mind without warning, bringing with her a familiar ache. That night, during dinner with Isabella, Edward was more distant than usual. "Edward, you haven't even touched your food," Isabella complained. "I'm not very hungry." "You've been acting strange for weeks. What's going on?" Edward looked at her. "Beautiful," well-dressed, talking about wedding preparations with an excitement he couldn't share. She was a good woman, truly. She would be a suitable wife, a responsible mother to the children they would eventually have. "But Isabella, do you love me?" he asked suddenly. What a strange question. Of course I do. Why are you asking that? And why do you love me? Isabella seemed uncomfortable with the depth of the question. Well, you're smart, successful, handsome. We're perfect for each other. Our families. Yes, our families, Edward interrupted. What if I wasn't rich? If I wasn't a thorn? Would you still love me? Edward, what is this conversation? You're being ridiculous. But Edward wasn't being ridiculous. For the first time in years, he was trying to understand the difference between convenience and true love. With Lily, he had felt something he could never explain, a connection that went beyond logic, beyond social conveniences. She loved him, not for what he had, but for who he was. And he had let her slip away, a prince in a distant castle. That same night in Cedar Falls, Lily put Liam to sleep. The boy had asked, and he did every night, for her to tell the story of the prince who lived in a distant castle. "Mommy, when will I meet my daddy?" Liam asked, holding her hand tightly. "Someday, my love, when the time is right. Will he like me?" "He will love you very much, Liam. Impossible not to love you." After the boy fell asleep, Lily went to the closet and took out a small shoebox where she kept her most precious memories. Inside was Edward's photo, yellowed with time, the pregnancy test she had saved, and the letter she had written to herself the day she left Willow Creek. She opened the letter and reread the words she had written 5 years earlier. "If one day you are reading this, it's because our son is asking about his father. Edward Thorne is a good man, just lost in a world that doesn't allow him to be happy. I loved him more than anything in life, but I couldn't be the weight that would drag him down. Maybe one day, when Liam is older, I'll find the courage to tell him the truth. Until then, I will love them both in silence." Lily closed the letter and looked at Edward's photo. Would he be married now? Would he have other children? Would he be happy? What she didn't know was that, at that exact moment, Edward was in his room in Willow Creek, looking out the window and wondering where the only woman he had truly loved was. And if somewhere, she sometimes thought of him too. Fate, however, was preparing a meeting that would change everything. Because the next day, Edward would receive a phone call that would force him to travel inland to solve a problem at a factory of a company he had recently acquired, a factory that was only 15 miles from Cedar Falls. Do you think Liam will ever meet his father? What role do you think fate will play in bringing them together? Share your thoughts below and subscribe to see how this story unfolds. An unavoidable collision. Tuesday morning began like any other for Lily. She woke up at 5:30, prepared breakfast for Liam, got him ready for school, and headed to the garment factory where she worked. There was nothing to indicate that this would be the day that would change her life forever. Edward had arrived in Springfield the night before to solve problems at the textile factory his company had acquired. The establishment was facing serious production issues, and he needed to decide whether it was worth maintaining operations or closing permanently, laying off 200 employees. "Mr. Thorne, it's almost 9 o'clock, said his assistant Mark. "The factory director is waiting." Edward adjusted his tie and picked up his jacket. He had slept poorly, disturbed by strange dreams, where a child with green eyes called him Daddy. He woke up with a strange feeling, as if something important was about to happen. The factory was on the road connecting Springfield to Cedar Falls. During the meeting with the directors, Edward analyzed numbers, listened to reports, and made decisions that would affect hundreds of lives. But his mind was strangely restless. "We need to visit the sewing department," the factory director said. "Some employees came from neighboring towns specifically to talk to you about an improvement proposal." Meanwhile, Lily was at the Cedar Falls garment factory, finishing an urgent order when her boss, Mrs. Rosa, appeared with an anxious expression. "Lily, I need you for something important. Remember I mentioned our factory might get a big contract with a Springfield factory?" "Yes, ma'am. The company owner is there today, and they asked some suppliers to bring work samples. You're my best seamstress. I need you to go there and show our work." Lily hesitated. She avoided leaving Cedar Falls whenever possible, especially for larger cities, where there was a greater chance of running into someone from her past. But Mrs. Rosa was counting on her, and the contract could mean more work and better pay. "Of course, Mrs. Rosa. When do I need to go?" "Now. The driver is waiting outside." An hour later. Lily was at the Springfield factory, nervous and uncomfortable in an environment so different from her small world. She carried a folder with the best pieces she had sewn, waiting in a meeting room along with other suppliers. Edward was in the production sector when Mark approached. "Mr. Thorne, the specialized material suppliers have arrived. Would you like to see their work before we make final decisions?" "Of course. Let's see what they have to offer." They walked towards the meeting room. Edward was reviewing some papers when he entered the room without looking up immediately. He was talking to Mark about production costs when a familiar voice made his heart stop. "Good morning. I'm Lily Evans from Cedar Falls Fashions. I've brought some samples of our work." Edward slowly looked up, as if in a dream. And there she was, Lily. After 5 years, 5 months, and 16 days, he had counted every one. She was there, just 10 feet away. She had changed. She was a little thinner, her face slightly more mature, but her brown eyes were exactly the same. When their eyes met, Lily paled so much that Mark became concerned. "Ma'am, are you feeling well?" Lily couldn't breathe. Edward was there, more handsome than she remembered, wearing an impeccable suit, with the authority of someone who commanded companies. For a moment, she thought about running, about making up an excuse and leaving immediately. She stammered, holding the folder so tightly that her fingers turned white. "Mark, can you give us a few minutes?" Edward said, without taking his eyes off Lily. "Of course, sir. I'll be in the corridor if you need anything." When they were alone, the silence was deafening. 5 years of pain, longing, regret, and unrequited love hung in the air between them. "Lily," Edward said finally, his voice huskier than he intended. "Mr. Thorne," she replied formally, trying to maintain composure. "Please don't call me that." "What should I call you then?" There was poorly disguised pain in her voice. 5 years have passed. A lot has changed. Edward took a step closer, and Lily instinctively recoiled. "Where were you?" he asked. "I looked for you. For months I looked for you." "There was no reason to look for me. I was just your employee. You know it wasn't just that." Edward felt the anger and pain of those years resurfacing. "You vanished without explanation, without saying goodbye, without what? Without getting in the way of your relationship with Isabella, without causing a scandal for your family. I did what was best for everyone." Lily exploded, losing the composure she tried to maintain. "For everyone but me. Oh, for God's sake." Lily laughed bitterly. "You probably don't even remember what happened between us. I'm sure Isabella was a very suitable comfort." Edward was silent for a moment, fighting the urge to pull her into his arms and kiss her until she understood that he had never been able to forget her. "You're right," he finally said. "Isabella is a suitable comfort. So much so that we're getting married in 2 months." If Edward expected any reaction of jealousy or pain, he was disappointed. Lily merely nodded, as if confirming something she already knew. "Congratulations," she said, with a coolness that surprised him. "I'm sure you'll be very happy. And you?" He couldn't help himself. "Are you happy?" Lily thought of Liam, of her son's smile every morning, of the nights reading stories, of the drawings stuck on the fridge. She thought of the simple but loving life she had built. "Very," she replied, and it wasn't a lie. She was happy, just not complete. Is there someone in your life?" The question came out before Edward could control himself. Lily looked him in the eyes, and for a moment considered telling him everything. Telling him about Liam, about the nights she stayed awake thinking about him, about how she had cried when she learned of his engagement through a magazine she found by chance at the doctor's office. "Yes," she lied, "I have someone very special." Edward felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. For 5 years, he had harbored a secret hope that she still loved him, that one day they could meet again. "I understand," he said, trying to keep his voice firm. "Well, about the work." Lily opened the folder with trembling hands. "These are some pieces I made, if you're not interested." "Lily, please," Edward interrupted. "We can't pretend nothing happened between us." "Nothing happened," she lied again. "It was just a few weeks of confusion. You were right from the start. We were from different worlds." Before Edward could reply, the door opened, and Mark returned, accompanied by the factory director. "Mr. Thorne, sorry to interrupt, but we have an urgent call from Willow Creek. Your fiancé is on the line." Lily felt as if she had been slapped. Reality hit her like an avalanche. Edward was really going to marry Isabella, the perfect woman for him, from his world, who would never be a source of shame or scandal. "Tell her I'll call her back in 5 minutes," Edward replied, without taking his eyes off Lily. "Sir, she seemed very upset. She mentioned something about the wedding." Edward hesitated, torn between his fiancée and the woman he could never forget. "Go," Lily said softly. "Your fiancé needs you." "Lily." "Edward, go. I'm leaving anyway. I'll leave the samples with the director." She moved towards the door, but Edward held her arm. "Where do you live? How can I find you?" "You can't." She gently pulled away. "And you shouldn't. You have a good life, Edward. A life that suits you. Don't ruin that for the sake of ghosts from the past." "You're not a ghost. I am." Lily smiled sadly. "And ghosts should stay where they belong, in the past." She left the room without looking back, leaving Edward alone with the sound of her footsteps fading and his heart breaking once more. A child's unveiling. The truth revealed. In the car that took her back to Cedar Falls, Lily cried silently. Seeing Edward again had awakened all the feelings she had tried to bury, but it had also confirmed her decision from 5 years ago. They truly were from different worlds, and now there was Liam to protect. When she arrived home, she found her son playing in the garden with Carmen. "Mommy!" Liam ran to her. "You took so long! I missed you!" Lily picked him up and hugged him tightly, inhaling the scent of childhood that always calmed her. "I missed you too, my love." "Why are you crying, Mommy?" "I'm not crying," she lied, quickly wiping her tears. "It's just something in my eye." That night, after Liam fell asleep, Lily looked at her son and saw Edward in every feature of the child's face. The resemblance was getting stronger every day, especially the green eyes that were an exact copy of his father's. In 2 months, Edward would be married. In a few years, he would have children with Isabella, and Liam would grow up without ever knowing his father, just with stories about a prince who lived in a distant castle. Perhaps it was better this way. Perhaps some stories were too beautiful for reality. Edward couldn't sleep that night. The call with Isabella had been about floral details for the wedding, something completely trivial that she had labeled urgent. As he listened to his fiancée talk about orchids versus roses, his mind was with Lily, trying to decipher everything that hadn't been said at their meeting. She had changed, not just physically, but there was a new maturity in her eyes, a strength that wasn't there before, and she had lied about having someone special. Edward knew Lily too well not to realize when she lied. The way she bit her lip, the way she looked away. They were the same gestures from 5 years ago. The next morning, Edward made an impulsive decision. Instead of going straight back to Willow Creek as he had planned, he told Mark that they needed to check on some local suppliers before leaving. "Sir, but we already have all the necessary reports," Mark questioned. "I want to get to know the region better. You never know when this information might be useful." In truth, Edward secretly hoped to find Lily again. Perhaps see her in her environment. Understand the life she had built away from him. They drove to Cedar Falls, a small town where everyone knew everyone. Edward asked Mark to inquire about Cedar Falls fashions, using the possibility of new contracts as an excuse. "It's right there on Main Street," a local shopkeeper informed him. "Mrs. Rosa is a very honest woman. She has an employee there, Lily, who is the best seamstress in the region. Top quality work." Edward's heart quickened at hearing her name mentioned with such respect and affection. It was almost noon when Edward decided to walk through the town, while Mark sorted out some bureaucratic details. The streets were quiet, very different from the hustle and bustle of Willow Creek. He was lost in thought when he heard a child's voice that made his blood run cold. "Watch out, Mom! The car!" Edward instinctively turned in the direction of the voice and saw a scene that would make his world crumble. A small child had let go of a woman's hand and was running after a ball that had rolled into the street. A car was approaching, and the woman, who had her back to Edward, ran desperately after the child. Edward didn't think twice. He ran into the street and picked up the boy, pulling him out of the vehicle's path seconds before he would have been hit. The car braked sharply, honking angrily, but then drove on. "Liam! My God, Liam!" the woman cried, running towards them. When she turned, Edward felt as if the world had stopped. It was Lily, pale with fright, extending her arms to take the child he held. But it was when Edward looked at the boy that his life changed forever. The child had curly brown hair, the same face shape Edward saw in the mirror every day, and eyes, green eyes identical to his own. There was no possible doubt. It was like looking at himself at 4 years old. "Liam," Edward repeated the name in a whisper, unable to take his eyes off the child. "Thank you for saving my son," Lily said quickly, taking Liam from Edward's arms. Her hands trembled visibly. "Come on, Leo, you need to be more careful." But Liam, with the typical curiosity of children, looked fascinated at Edward. "You have eyes just like mine," the boy observed innocently. Edward felt as if he had been struck by lightning. Lily paled even more. "Liam, let's go," she said firmly. "Mommy, he's just like me." Look at his eyes. Now, Liam. But Edward knelt to the child's height, hypnotized by the resemblance. "What's your full name?" he asked softly. "Liam Evans," the boy replied proudly. "I'm 4 years old." Edward did the math quickly. 4 years old. Lily had disappeared 5 years ago. Pregnancy would last 9 months. "Liam Evans," Edward repeated, looking directly at Lily. "Not Liam Evans Thorne." Lily closed her eyes for a moment, knowing there was no longer any way to escape the truth. When she opened them, Edward saw tears forming. "Please," she whispered. "Not here." "Mommy, do you know this man?" Liam asked, sensing the tension between the adults. "Yes, Leo, I do," she replied. Her voice choked. Edward stood up slowly, the shock still processing in his mind. 5 years, he said softly. "You were pregnant for 5 years and never told me." "Edward, please, I have a son," he said, more to himself than to her. "I have a 4-year-old son." Liam looked from one to the other, confused by the adults' conversation. "Are you two friends?" he asked. Edward knelt again, this time with tears in his eyes. "Liam, do you know who I am?" The boy shook his head negatively. "I am..." Edward looked at Lily, who was crying silently. "I am Edward." "Edward? Like the prince from Mommy's story?" Liam asked, his eyes lighting up. Edward looked at Lily with an expression of surprise and emotion. You told stories about me? About a prince who lived in a distant castle, Lily admitted through tears. Liam put the pieces together with the simple logic of a child. You're my daddy? He asked, his green eyes sparkling with expectation. Edward couldn't speak. He just nodded, and Liam threw himself into his arms, with the naturalness of someone who had always known that moment would come. I knew it! Liam shouted, hugging Edward tightly. I knew you would come for me! Edward embraced his son. His son, with an emotion so intense it physically hurt. All the years of emptiness, of coldness, of living on autopilot made sense now. He had been created for that moment, for that unconditional and instantaneous love. Why didn't you tell me? He asked Lily over Liam's head. Because you were building a new life. Because I didn't want to be an obligation. An obligation? Edward stood up, still holding Liam. He's my son, Lily. My blood. My responsibility. Your social ruin, she completed bitterly. A bastard child with a housekeeper. Your mother would die of heartbreak. Isabella would cancel the wedding, and you would be an outcast in high society. Do you think I care about that? You should care. It's your life, Edward. Liam, still in his father's arms, looked from one to the other with concern. Are you fighting? He asked in a small voice. Edward and Lily looked at each other, realizing they were arguing in front of the child. No, my love, Lily said softly. Daddy and Mommy are just talking about grown-up things. Daddy is leaving again? Liam asked, clinging to Edward's neck. The child's innocent question hit Edward like a dagger. His son had grown up without him, without knowing if he would ever have a present father. Never again, Edward promised, looking into the boy's eyes. I will never leave without you again. Edward, you can't make promises you won't be able to keep, Lily intervened. Who said I won't be able to keep them? Your life in Willow Creek, your wedding, Isabella. Hearing Isabella's name, Edward felt as if he had woken from a dream. Isabella. The wedding in 2 months. The perfectly planned life that was about to completely implode. Daddy, who is Isabella? Liam asked with the acute hearing of children. Edward looked at his son, then at Lily, and made the most important decision of his life. Isabella is a friend of Mommy's, but she's not important anymore, he said simply. Lily looked at him, shocked. Edward, you can't just go. I can and I will, he interrupted her. Liam, do you want to see where Daddy works? Can I? The boy asked, excited. Of course, but first we need to talk to Mommy about many important things. Lily knew there was no turning back now. The secret she had kept for 5 years was exposed, and the consequences would be immeasurable. But when she saw the radiant smile on Liam's face and he was in his father's arms, she knew that perhaps, just perhaps, it had been worth keeping that secret until the right moment. Now it remained to be seen if Edward was truly willing to give up everything he had built for a son he barely knew, and a woman he had spent 5 years trying to forget. Will Edward truly give up everything for Lily and Liam? What do you predict will happen with Isabella and Eleanor? Comment your theories below. A simple home, a complicated truth. Carmen's house was small, but welcoming, with flowers on the window and the smell of coffee always in the air. Edward had never been in such a simple place, but at that moment, sitting in the modest living room with his son in his lap, he felt more at home than he had ever felt in Blackwood Manor. Liam wouldn't stop talking, telling stories about school, friends, the drawings he made for Mommy. Every word, every gesture from the child was a painful revelation of everything Edward had lost. Daddy, are you going to live here with us? Liam asked, playing with Edward's tie. Leo, Daddy has his life in Willow Creek. Lily intervened before Edward could answer. Willow Creek is far away, Liam pouted. I want you to live here. Edward looked at Lily, who avoided his gaze, nervous about the turn of the conversation. "We need to talk," he said softly to her. "Alone. Carmen can stay with Liam." Lily reluctantly agreed. They went out to the small backyard, where a few chickens pecked among the plants. The contrast with Edward's world couldn't have been greater, but strangely, he felt good there. "5 years, Lily," Edward began, his voice laden with contained emotion. 5 years when I could have been his father, and ruined your life in the process, she retorted. "Edward, be honest with me. If I had shown up pregnant 5 years ago, what would you have done?" Edward opened his mouth to protest, but closed it again. She was right. 5 years ago, he was different. Younger, more concerned with appearances, more submissive to family expectations. I don't know," he admitted, "but I should have had the chance to choose. And what if you had chosen Isabella? If you had sent me away? Liam would have grown up knowing his father rejected him. At least this way he grew up believing in a beautiful dream. A dream you created by telling stories about me," Edward added. "About what you could have been if you were free to choose," Lily corrected. The prince in the stories didn't have a controlling mother, didn't have social expectations, didn't have a perfect fiancé waiting for him. Edward ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "And now? What do we do now? You go back to your life. I continue with mine. Maybe you can visit Liam sometimes." "Visit?" Edward stared at her in disbelief. "Lily, he's my son. I'm not going to be a weekend dad." "Then what do you suggest? That I go back to Willow Creek to be your mistress while you're married to Isabella?" "I'm not going to marry Isabella." The words came out before Edward could think, but when he said them, he realized it was true. He couldn't. Not after discovering he had a son. Not after finding Lily again. "Edward, don't be ridiculous. You're emotional now, but when you go back to Willow Creek..." "When I go back to Willow Creek, I'm canceling the wedding." Lily fell silent, studying his face. "And your mother? Your family? Your reputation?" "To hell with them," Edward said with a vehemence that surprised them both. Before Lily could respond, Edward's phone rang. It was Mark. "Mr. Thorne, sorry to bother you, but your fiancée has called several times. She said it's urgent, and she needs to speak with you immediately." Edward looked at Liam, who was playing on the floor with some toy cars, and at Lily, who watched everything with a mix of anxiety and resignation. "Mother, I need to tell you something important." "What could be more important than your wedding?" "I have a son," Edward said simply. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. "What do you mean you have a son? A 4-year-old son with a woman I love." "Edward, what kind of bad joke is this?" "It's not a joke, Mother. And I'm not marrying Isabella." "Have you gone mad? Where are you saying this from?" "From Cedar Falls in rural Pennsylvania." "What? Edward, you come home right now. We'll talk about all this madness." "It's not madness, Mother. For the first time in my life, I know exactly what I want." Edward hung up the phone under Lily's worried gaze. "Your mother isn't happy," she observed. "My mother is never happy when she can't control my life." "And Isabella?" "Isabella." Edward sighed. "Isabella deserves to know the truth, but it won't change anything. I can't marry her knowing I love you and that I have a son with you." "Edward, listen to what you're saying. You barely know Liam. You've seen me twice in 5 years. You might be romanticizing the situation." "Maybe," he admitted. "But what if I'm not? What if this is my chance to be truly happy, to have a real family?" Before Lily could respond, Liam ran to them. "Daddy, are you staying for dinner too?" Edward looked at Lily, and then at his son. "If Mommy lets me?" "Please, Mommy, please," Liam begged. Lily looked at the two of them, father and son, with the same green eyes and the same hopeful expression. And she knew she was losing the battle she had fought with herself for 5 years. "All right," she agreed. "But tomorrow you go back to Willow Creek and sort out your life." "Deal," Edward said. But in his heart, he already knew that sorting out his life meant something completely different from what Lily imagined. A mother's unexpected acceptance. That night, after Liam fell asleep, Edward and Lily sat in the small backyard under the starry sky. It was the first time in years Edward had truly looked at the stars. "It's beautiful here," he commented. "It's simple, but it is our home. Our? Mine and Leo's. And mine too, if you'll have me." Lily looked at him, and for a moment, allowed herself to dream of the possibility. Edward there, every day. Liam, growing up with a present father. A real family. But then she remembered reality. Edward was a thorn. She was a seamstress. Their world wouldn't allow such a union. "Edward, be realistic. This could never work." "Why not?" "Because you are you, and I am I. Because your family would never accept me. Because you would end up regretting it." What if I was willing to take that risk? What if I wasn't? Her question hung in the air, heavy and painful. Edward realized that despite everything, Lily was still afraid. Afraid of getting hurt again. Afraid of not being enough. Afraid that love wouldn't be enough to overcome all the differences. He wanted to promise that it would be different. That love would conquer all. But he knew words wouldn't be enough. He would have to prove it through actions. And the first step would be to go back to Willow Creek and face the consequences of his decision. What neither of them expected was that Isabella wouldn't passively wait for explanations. Furious at Edward's disappearance, she had decided to go after him personally. And at that exact moment, she was on her way to Cedar Falls, determined to bring her fiancé back, no matter the cost. The next morning, Edward woke up in Carmen's small guest room with a strange sense of peace. For the first time in years, he had slept without disturbing dreams, without the constant anxiety that accompanied him in Willow Creek. The sound of Liam playing in the backyard fully awakened him, and he got up with a genuine smile on his face. When he went down to the kitchen, he found Lily preparing breakfast. She was different from the elegant woman he had known 5 years ago, her hair tied in a simple ponytail, wearing a basic blouse and jeans. But to Edward, she had never been more beautiful. "Good morning," he said softly. "Good morning," she replied without looking at him, focused on buttering the bread. "Liam already had breakfast. He goes to school in 15 minutes. Can I take him?" "Edward, please. I promised him yesterday." Lily sighed, knowing she couldn't deny her son that joy. "All right, but then you go back to Willow Creek." At that moment, Liam ran into the kitchen, already dressed in his school uniform. "Daddy, you're still here!" He threw himself into Edward's arms. "Of course I am. I promised to take you to school, remember? I'm going to tell all my friends that my daddy brought me," Liam said excitedly. During the walk to school, Liam chattered about teachers, friends, activities he liked best. Edward absorbed every word, every detail of his son's life that he had missed. Every detail of his. "Daddy, are you coming back tonight?" Liam asked when they arrived at school. Edward looked at Lily, who had accompanied the walk in silence. "I need to sort some things out in Willow Creek first, but then you'll come back? I promise we'll see each other again very soon," Edward said, kneeling to his son's height. Liam hugged him tightly. "I love you, Daddy." The child's simple, sincere words pierced Edward's heart like an arrow. He had never felt such pure, unconditional love. "I love you too, my boy. More than you can imagine." After dropping Liam off at school, Edward and Lily walked back in silence. The tension between them was palpable. Both knew this was goodbye, but neither wanted to take the first step. "Lily." Edward stopped walking and faced her. "Come with me to Willow Creek. Bring Liam. You can live with me while I sort everything out." "Live with you?" She laughed bitterly. "As what? Your mistress an illegitimate child hidden in the attic?" "As my family," Edward said firmly. "I'm canceling the wedding with Isabella, facing my mother, and publicly acknowledging that I have a son with the woman I love. And then? When the novelty wears off? When you realize you can't take me to business dinners because I don't know which forks to use. Lily, do you really think that matters to me? It should matter, she exploded, because it will matter to everyone around you. Your mother will never accept me. Your friends will despise me. And one day you'll look at me and see only— What? Edward approached her. I'll see what, Lily? A housekeeper who ruined your life. Edward held her shoulders, forcing her to look into his eyes. You saved my life. Before you, I was just a machine, programmed to make money and fulfill expectations. You taught me to feel, to love, to be human. Forgive me, Edward. I know I'm asking a lot. I know it's risky, but I can't go back to that empty life, knowing you and Liam exist. Lily was about to reply when the sound of an expensive car approaching caught her attention. A black Mercedes pulled up in front of Carmen's house, and out stepped a blonde woman, elegant and visibly furious. Isabella. My God, Lily murmured. How did she find us? Edward clenched his fists. He had forgotten that Isabella could be extremely determined when she wanted something. Isabella walked towards them with firm steps, her high heels clicking on the humble street's asphalt. She was impeccably dressed, a woman clearly out of place in that simple environment. Edward! She screamed from a distance. What is this charade? Isabella, what are you doing here? Coming to get my fiancé. She stopped in front of them, completely ignoring Lily. Have you gone mad, disappearing like this, worrying everyone, canceling our appointments? Isabella, we need to talk. Of course we do. She looked around with disdain. But not here, in this place. Let's leave right now. I'm not leaving. What do you mean you're not leaving? Isabella finally noticed Lily, studying her from head to toe. And who is this? Edward took a deep breath. The moment of truth had arrived. Isabella, this is Lily, the woman I love. The silence that followed was deafening. Isabella looked from Edward to Lily, trying to process the information. The woman you love? She repeated slowly. Edward, did you hit your head? This person obviously isn't from our social standing. Isabella, Edward began. His voice laced with warning. No, Edward! Isabella exploded. I'm not going to stand here and listen to you say you love a— She looked at Lily with contempt. A nobody! Watch your words, Edward said, dangerously low. Lily, who had remained silent, finally spoke. Isabella, Edward is free to choose. If he said he loves me, maybe you should respect him. Respect? Isabella laughed sarcastically. Do you really think you're going to steal my fiancé with that innocent face? No one is stealing anyone, Lily replied with dignity. Love isn't stolen. It either exists or it doesn't. Love? Isabella turned to Edward. Edward, tell me this is a temporary crisis. One of those male fantasies that pass quickly. It's not a fantasy, Isabella, and it won't pass. Because of her, Isabella pointed at Lily as if she were something disgusting. Edward, look closely at her. Look at where you are. Is this what you want? To trade our life, our social position, our future for this? Isabella, you're being disrespectful. Disrespectful? Isabella was becoming hysterical. I'm being disrespectful? You disappeared 2 days before an important meeting about our wedding to be with a what? A child's voice interrupted the argument. Everyone turned and saw Liam standing at the corner, clearly having come home from school early. His green eyes were fixed on Isabella, but there was confusion on his face seeing the adults arguing. Liam, Lily stepped forward. My love, you're home early. The teacher canceled the last class, he said, but his eyes never left Isabella. Then, with the brutal honesty of children, he asked, Who's the angry lady? Isabella looked at the child, and her eyes widened. Even a blind person could see the resemblance between Liam and Edward. Edward, she said slowly. This child, he has your eyes. Isabella, is this child yours? Isabella's voice was getting shriller with each word. Edward looked at Liam, who watched them with curiosity, and made the bravest decision of his life. Yes, he said clearly, Liam is my son. Isabella staggered as if she had been slapped. Your son? How long have you had a son? He's 4 years old. 4 years old? Isabella quickly did the math. That means when we started dating. I didn't know he existed, Edward said quickly. Lily never told me. Isabella turned to Lily with murderous fury. You hid his son, and now you show up to destroy our wedding? I didn't come after anyone, Lily replied calmly. Edward found me. Liar. You planned all this? Isabella, stop! Edward placed himself between the two women, but Isabella was beyond reason. 5 years of a relationship, months of wedding preparations. Her entire planned life was crumbling because of a simple woman from the countryside and her son. You choose, she said to Edward, her voice trembling with rage. Either them or me, but I won't share you with anyone. There's nothing to choose, Edward replied softly. Isabella, I'm sorry, but I can't marry you. Because of her? Because of a housekeeper and a bastard child? The word bastard, referring to Liam, made Edward see red. Get out of here, he said, his voice dangerously low. Now! Edward, you'll regret this, Isabella threatened. When you realize the mistake you're making, you'll come looking for me. But it might be too late. That's a possibility I'll have to live with. Isabella looked one last time at Lily, then at Liam, and finally at Edward. You lost the chance to have everything. I hope she's worth it. She is, Edward said without hesitation. Isabella got into the car and drove off at high speed, leaving a cloud of dust and the smell of burning tires. Liam, who had watched everything in silence, approached Edward. Daddy, the angry lady didn't like me. Edward knelt and hugged his son. It has nothing to do with you, my boy. Sometimes adults get sad when things change. But you're not leaving because of her, are you? Edward looked at Lily, who was pale and visibly shaken. No, Leo, I'm not leaving. But even as he made that promise to his son, Edward knew the storm was just beginning. Isabella wouldn't give up easily, and his family still knew nothing. The war for his happiness was just beginning. What an explosive encounter. How do you think Edward's mother, Eleanor, will react to all this? Do you think she'll accept Liam? Share your predictions in the comments. A mother's unexpected shift. After Isabella's departure, a heavy silence hung over the small street. Edward still held Liam in his arms, while Lily remained standing, visibly shaken by the confrontation she had just witnessed. Mommy, why are you sad? Liam asked, reaching out to her. I'm not sad, my love, Lily lied, picking up her son. Just a little tired. Edward approached them, but Lily took a step back. Lily, Edward, you need to leave, she said softly. Right now, before it's too late. Too late for what? For you to go back, to fix things with Isabella, to save your life. My life was lost 5 years ago. You two saved me. Before Lily could reply, another car approached. This time, it was a black limousine with a driver. Out stepped an elegant and imperious woman, whom Edward immediately recognized. Eleanor Thorne had arrived. My God, Edward murmured. How did she find out where I am? Isabella, Lily replied bitterly. I bet she called your mother on the way. Eleanor walked towards them, with the rigid posture of an offended queen. Her eyes scanned the simple surroundings with evident disdain before fixing on her son. Edward Henry, what is this scandal? She said without preamble. Mother, what are you doing here? I came to get my son before he commits the biggest folly of his life. Eleanor looked at Lily and Liam coldly. So these are the ones responsible for all this confusion. Liam hid behind his mother, intimidated by the woman's imposing presence. Mother, don't talk like that in front of the child. Child? Eleanor laughed sarcastically. Do you really believe this boy is your son? Edward, for God's sake. Any desperate woman could invent a story like that to take advantage of you. The accusation made Lily turn pale. Madam, I wasn't talking to you. Eleanor cut her off coldly. Edward, get in the car now. We're going to resolve this situation once and for all. I'm not going anywhere. Have you completely lost your mind? Eleanor exploded. Isabella told me everything. You canceled the wedding because of a housekeeper and a child. We don't even know if he's really yours. She was my housekeeper, Edward corrected, his voice dangerously low. And Liam is my son. Oh, prove it, Eleanor challenged. How? DNA test. If this boy is really your son, we'll make a fair financial arrangement with this girl. But you come home and marry Isabella. Mother, you don't understand. I love Lily. Love. Eleanor laughed bitterly. Edward, you've confused sexual gratitude with love. This woman was clever. She got pregnant by you to secure her future. Enough! Edward shouted, making Liam jump and cling tighter to his mother. I will not tolerate you talking about the woman I love and my son like that. Your son? Eleanor looked at Liam for the first time with attention. When she saw the green eyes identical to Edward's, her expression shifted slightly. Even if he is your son, that doesn't mean you should destroy your life. We can provide this child with a proper education away from you. Never, Edward said firmly. Edward, be rational. Are you going to throw everything away? Your social position, your businesses, your future. Why? For a passion that will pass? Because for the first time in my life, I know what it means to be happy. Eleanor studied her son's face and saw something that surprised her. Determination. A strength she had never seen in him before. Edward, you've always been an obedient son. Always done what was best for the family. And look what that turned me into. An empty, cold man, incapable of feeling anything real. Better that than being a social outcast. Mother, Edward approached her, speaking more softly. I love you. You are my mother, and always will be. But I can no longer live the life you planned for me. And if I disinherit you, if I cut off all your resources, Edward looked at Lily and Liam, then back at his mother. Then I'll work with my own hands if I have to. But I will not give up my family. Eleanor was silent for a long moment, studying her son. Finally, she looked at Lily. And you? She asked coldly. What do you have to say about all this? Lily took a deep breath. This was the most important moment of her life. Mrs. Thorne, I never wanted to cause problems for Edward. When I found out I was pregnant, I left his life precisely so as not to harm him. Then why didn't you do it again now? Why? Lily looked at Edward, then at Liam. Because our son deserves to have a father. And me? I'm tired of being afraid. Afraid of what? Afraid of not being good enough. Afraid that one day Edward would regret me. Afraid that love wouldn't be enough to overcome all the differences between us. And now you're not afraid anymore? Lily looked into Edward's eyes and saw 5 years of pain, loneliness, and regret. She also saw true love, determination, and the promise of a future she had dreamed of, but never dared to hope for. I'm still afraid, she admitted. But I'm more afraid of losing the chance to be happy again. Eleanor observed the interaction between the two. And for the first time in decades, she saw her son truly in love. Not by convenience, not by obligation, but by true love. Edward, she said finally, are you absolutely sure of what you're doing? More sure than I've ever been of anything in my life. And are you willing to face all the consequences? The scandal? The businesses that might be lost? The completely different life? I am. Eleanor sighed deeply, as if carrying the weight of the world. Then may God bless you both, she said surprisingly. Because you're going to need it. Edward looked at her, shocked. Mother. Edward, I've always wanted your happiness. Perhaps I got confused and thought happiness meant social status and money. But looking at you now, she paused. You're different, but alive. Does that mean? It means you're an adult, and you can make your own decisions. Even if I don't completely agree, I won't abandon my son. Edward approached his mother and hugged her. Thank you, Mother. Don't thank me yet. Eleanor pulled away from the embrace and looked at Lily. Young lady, if you make my son suffer, you'll have to answer to me. I would never intentionally make Edward suffer, Lily replied with dignity. And you? Eleanor addressed Liam, who was still hiding behind his mother. Come here, boy. Liam looked at Edward, who nodded encouragingly. Slowly, the boy approached Eleanor. Do you know who I am? She asked, kneeling to his height. Daddy's grandma? Liam asked shyly. That's right, and that makes me your grandmother, Eleanor said, and for the first time, her face softened. Would you like to see your house in Willow Creek? Liam's eyes lit up. Can I, Mommy? He asked Lily. That's very kind of you, Mrs. Thorne, Lily stammered. Eleanor is fine. We're going to be family after all. Edward looked around at his mother, who was trying to accept the new reality. At Liam, who finally had a grandmother. At Lily, who seemed to not believe any of this was truly happening. Then, he said, taking Lily's hand, how about we go to Willow Creek? All of us. Together. Edward, are you sure? Lily asked one last time. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. And Isabella? Isabella will find someone who loves her as she deserves. Someone who isn't me. Lily looked at Liam, who was holding Eleanor's hand and asking 1,000 questions about the house in Willow Creek. She looked at Edward, who was watching her with so much love that she felt her heart finally settle. All right, she said softly. Let's go to Willow Creek. Edward kissed her right there, in front of his mother, his son, and the whole street. It was a kiss of promise, of a new beginning, of love that had withstood 5 years of separation and had finally triumphed. When they broke apart, Liam clapped. Daddy and Mommy kissed, just like in the movies. Better than in the movies, Edward said, hugging them both. Because this is real. That afternoon they packed their bags. There wasn't much to take. A few clothes, Liam's drawings, the yellowed photo Lily had kept for 5 years. But they were taking the most important thing, a family reunited after a long time apart. When the limousine departed from Cedar Falls, Liam was on Edward's lap, telling stories to his grandmother, while Lily watched the town that had been her refuge fade away through the window. She felt no sadness, only gratitude for having found the courage to accept the happiness life was offering. Edward held her hand. No regrets? He asked softly. About what? About keeping the secret for so long? Lily looked at Liam, who was laughing at something Eleanor had said, and then at Edward. No, she said, because if I had told you earlier, maybe you wouldn't have been ready. Maybe we wouldn't have been ready. Sometimes things happen at the right time, even when it seems too late. Do you think we'll make it? He asked, with all the differences, all the difficulties. I think, Lily smiled, that true love always finds a way. And as the limousine sped towards Willow Creek, towards an uncertain but possibility-filled future, Edward knew he had made the right decision. For the first time in his life, he was going to a real home, not to an empty mansion, but to where his family was. The boy with the green eyes had finally found his father. The woman who had loved in silence for 5 years had found her courage. And the man who thought he was condemned to eternal coldness had discovered that his heart still knew how to love. Not everything would be easy. There would be obstacles, judgments, difficult moments, but they would face everything together as a true family. And that, Edward knew, was more valuable than any wealth or social status he might have lost. Love had finally won, a lasting harmony. The wedding and beyond. The weeks leading up to the ceremony were a perfect reflection of Edward and Lily's relationship, a constant exercise in balancing different worlds. Edward, accustomed to delegating everything to professionals, initially suggested hiring a renowned event planner who had planned celebrity weddings. That way, you won't have to worry about anything, he argued, showing her the professional's luxurious portfolio. Lily flipped through the material in silence, observing the extravagant decorations and ostentatious details. "It's beautiful," she conceded, closing the catalog. "But it doesn't feel like us. I want to be part of every decision, choose every flower, every detail. I want it to be personal, not perfect." Edward's eyes softened, understanding. "Then we'll do it together, our way." And so it was. On nights after putting Liam to sleep, they would sit on the new house's balcony with papers, fabric samples, and lists spread between cups of tea. Edward discovered an unexpected pleasure in participating in these choices. Never before had he cared about color nuances or types of flowers. One night, while debating the menu, Lily surprised him. "I'd like us to serve mini savory pastries," she said, watching his reaction. "It's what I ate the day I found out I was pregnant. I was alone, scared, not knowing what to do. I ate a pastry sitting on a park bench, imagining what life would be like from then on." Edward took her hand, his eyes moist with emotion. "We'll have the best mini savory pastries in the world at our wedding," he promised. "And never again will you be alone with your fears." The guest list was another challenge. Edward's first version had over 200 names. Partners, influential businessmen, politicians, people it would be strategic to invite. Lily's had only 20. Close friends, some teachers, Ms. Jenkins. After long conversations, they reached a middle ground. 80 people who genuinely meant something to both of them. Edward was surprised to realize how many friends on his original list were merely superficial connections. The night before the wedding, while Lily spent the night at a friend's house following tradition, Edward stayed alone with Liam. It was the first time he had taken care of his son for an entire night without Lily's presence. "And now it's just us, champ," he said, after putting the boy to bed. "Are you excited for tomorrow?" Liam nodded sleepily, hugging the teddy bear that had been with him since he was a baby. "I'm going to carry the rings. You can't get married without them," he said, with the seriousness only a child can have. "Exactly," Edward agreed, stroking his hair. "You have the most important role." When Liam finally fell asleep, Edward went to the balcony with a glass of whiskey. Looking at the stars, he reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought him there. He remembered what his life was like before, the impeccably clean, empty penthouse, the lonely nights disguised as freedom, the superficial relationships. If someone told me 2 years ago that I'd be here, about to marry a woman I briefly met, and have a son with whom I learned the meaning of love, I would have laughed in that person's face, he murmured to himself. His phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was Lily. "Just wanted to say goodnight," she said, and he could hear the smile in her voice. "And that I love you." "I love you too," he replied, with a naturalness that still surprised him. "Liam's asleep. Everything's under control." "Are you sure? I can hear the ice in your glass." Edward chuckled. "Just a whiskey to toast the stars and the extraordinary woman who will be my wife tomorrow." The silence on the other end of the line was laden with emotion. "You've really changed," she finally said. "You and Liam transformed me," he corrected. "Good night, future Mrs. Thorne." "Summers Thorne," she corrected with a laugh. "Some things don't change, Edward." And he smiled, because he didn't want them to change. The wedding morning dawned perfectly. Clear sky, mild temperature, a gentle breeze rustling the garden flowers. Liam woke up excited, jumping on Edward's bed. "It's today, Daddy! It's today you and Mommy are getting married!" Edward hugged him, inhaling deeply the scent of child shampoo from his son's hair. "Yes, champ. Today we officially become a family." "But we're already a family," Liam replied, with the simple wisdom of children. The comment touched Edward deeply. "You're right. We're just celebrating what we already are." The morning preparations passed in a whirlwind, the caterers arriving, chairs being positioned in the garden, the small makeshift altar under the oldest tree on the property. Edward supervised everything with an attention to detail that surprised even his assistants, normally in charge of such tasks. "I want everything to be perfect for her," he explained when asked. "Not because we're rich or important, but because she deserves the most beautiful celebration in the world." As he dressed, helped by his best man, an old college friend who had remained close despite the changes in his life, Edward received a small wrapped box with a note from Lily. "For you to wear today, and remember where we came from," the note read. Inside was a pair of simple cufflinks made with small blue stones. "She bought these for you?" asked the best man, surprised by the simplicity of the gift. "No," Edward replied, his voice thick. "These are the stones Liam found on the beach the first time we went to the sea together. All three of us. He was fascinated by the color and said it matched his mom's eyes." The best man watched with new understanding as Edward replaced the diamond cufflinks he had planned to wear with the simple blue stones. "She turned them into the most valuable gift I've ever received," Edward added. When the first chords of music began, the guests already settled in the garden chairs turned to see Liam, impeccable in his little suit, carrying a cushion with the wedding rings. The boy walked with absolute concentration, his tongue slightly out in a sign of effort not to run or trip. Edward, waiting at the makeshift altar, felt his heart swell with pride. His son, words that still evoked a wave of emotion, approached with such earnestness to do everything right. Then, the music changed, and everyone stood. Lily appeared at the beginning of the flower-lined path, and Edward's world stopped. It wasn't the dress, though it was beautiful in its elegant simplicity. It wasn't the hairstyle, nor the soft makeup that enhanced her natural beauty. It was the smile, the quiet confidence, the eyes that met his immediately among everyone. It was the woman who had transformed his life by showing him what truly mattered. Tears came unbidden, and for the first time in his life, Edward didn't try to hold them back. He let them stream freely down his face, silent witnesses to the transformation in his heart. When Lily reached him, given away by her elderly grandmother, who had raised her since she was young, Edward took her trembling hands in his. "You look absolutely stunning," he whispered. "And you're crying," she replied with a tender smile, wiping a tear from his face. "From happiness," he confirmed, "the first of many." The ceremony proceeded, intimate and emotional. Not only did the officiant speak, but close friends also shared memories and wishes for the couple. Ms. Jenkins, visibly moved, recounted how she had seen love slowly blossom between them, day after day, coffee cup after coffee cup, until they could no longer deny what was before everyone's eyes. During the vows, Edward surprised everyone with his sincerity. "Lily, before you and Liam entered my life, I was a man rich in possessions, but poor in meaning. You taught me that true wealth is not what we own, but whom we love and how we love. I remember the day I sat for hours watching Liam sleep, marveling at every breath, every movement of his tiny fingers, realizing that nothing I had achieved until then compared to that moment of pure admiration. I promise every day to be the man you and our son deserve, to walk by your side through happy and difficult times, and to build a better world with you, not just for us, but for all the children we will touch through our projects. And above all, I promise never to forget that the greatest fortune I possess is here, in the love we share." Lily's equally moving vows reflected the extraordinary journey they had traveled. "Edward, when I found out I was pregnant, I feared our son would grow up without knowing his father. The nights were long, full of uncertainties and fears. I remember talking to Liam still in my womb, promising I would be strong for both of us, that he would never lack love. I never imagined fate would bring us together in the most unexpected way, and that I would find in you not only the loving father Liam deserves, but also the partner who completes my life. You entered our small world, and instead of imposing yours, you learned to create a new one with us. You showed me that it's possible to be strong and vulnerable at the same time, that we can build bridges between different worlds when love is true. I saw you learn to change diapers with the same dedication with which you close multi-million-dollar deals. And I watched your transformation with growing admiration. I promise to walk by your side, to be your partner, your friend, your confidant. And together, to create a home where love, respect, and understanding are always our guides. During the exchange of rings, Liam, who was watching everything with his curious eyes, suddenly slipped away from Miss Jenkins and ran to join his parents, hugging their legs. Instead of embarrassment, the moment brought emotional laughter from the guests and an impromptu family hug that became the most significant photo in their wedding album. "I guess someone doesn't want to be left out," the officiant commented with a gentle smile. "He will never be left out," Edward replied, bending down to pick up his son. "We are here today because of him." And so, with Liam in Edward's arms, they completed the exchange of rings and were declared husband and wife. The kiss that sealed the union was interrupted by Liam's little voice. "Now we're a family forever." The guests erupted in applause and laughter as Lily and Edward exchanged glances of pure happiness. Yes, they were a family, not just from that moment on, but from the instant their paths crossed, guided by a small life that had begun even before they knew they could be a family. At the small reception that followed in the garden, decorated with soft lights and round tables under the shade of the trees, Edward surprised Lily with an announcement. "To celebrate our wedding, the Liam Olson Thorne Educational Foundation is officially launching a scholarship program for single mothers who wish to complete their studies, because everyone deserves a second chance just as life gave us." Lily, emotional, embraced her now husband, recognizing in the gesture not only generosity, but a deep understanding of her own journey. 20 full scholarships per year, he continued, covering not only tuition, but also textbooks, transportation, and, most importantly, childcare for their children during school hours. One of the guests, an important local businessman, immediately stood up. "Count me in to fund 5 more scholarships," he announced, inspired by the initiative. Before the night ended, the program had already tripled its initial reach, with other businessmen present committing to participate in the project. "See what you've done?" Lily whispered to Edward as they danced their first waltz as a couple. "You're transforming not just our lives, but so many other families." "We're doing this," he corrected, gently twirling her. "You showed me the way. I just have the resources to expand it." As night fell completely, paper lanterns were lit throughout the garden, creating an almost magical atmosphere. Liam, exhausted, but determined not to miss anything, fell asleep in Ms. Jenkins' lap, who watched the couple with maternal pride. "I've never seen two such different worlds meet so perfectly," she commented to her table neighbor. "It's as if each completes exactly what was missing in the other." When the guests began to leave, Edward and Lily remained hand in hand, receiving hugs and wishes for happiness. Liam was already sound asleep in his room, under the care of Ms. Jenkins, who had agreed to stay with him for a few days, while the newlyweds enjoyed a brief honeymoon. "Are you sure he'll be okay without us?" Lily asked, stroking her sleeping son's hair when she checked on him one last time. "He'll be great," the older woman assured her. "Besides, every mother deserves a few days to herself, especially one who has worked as hard as you, my dear." Lily kissed her son's forehead and then hugged the woman who had become an essential part of their lives. "Thank you, Ms. Jenkins, for everything. Go be happy, my child. You deserve it." The next morning, as they boarded a flight to a discreet private island, Lily's first trip on a private plane, she looked out at the ocean through the window. "I still feel like I'm in a dream," she confessed, watching the blue vastness below them. "As if at any moment I could wake up and be back in my small apartment, struggling to pay bills." Edward took her hand, caressing the new wedding band on her finger. "I also feel like I'm in a dream," he replied. "But my nightmare was different. It was waking up alone in an empty penthouse with all the money in the world and no one to share it with. No one who loved me for who I am, not for what I have." Lily turned to him, touching his face softly. "Who would have thought that brief encounter at the inauguration would bring us here?" "Destiny," he replied, squeezing her hand. "Or perhaps simply love." The 5 days they spent on the island were a deep dive into each other, without the distractions of routine, without daily responsibilities. Just the pleasure of simply being together, rediscovering each other in this new light. They walked on the beach at sunset, telling childhood stories, revealing dreams they had never shared with anyone. Edward spoke about the pressure of being the sole heir to an empire, the constant fear of disappointing his late father. Lily shared the pain of losing her parents so young, the loneliness of her first years on her own. "It's funny how we both knew loneliness in different forms," she reflected as they watched the stars on a particularly clear night. "You surrounded by people but without real connections. Me isolated by circumstances, but longing to belong. And now we belong to each other," he concluded, embracing her under the starry sky. And to Liam, it was that same night, under the sparkling moonlight on the sea, that Lily shared a dream she had never confessed to anyone. "I always wanted to have a daughter too," she said almost shyly. "A little sister for Liam, a complete family." Edward's eyes sparkled with contained emotion. "Maybe we can start working on that right now," he suggested with a tender smile, leading her by the hand back to their beachfront bungalow. Epilogue. A flourishing legacy. The school lawn was filled with chairs arranged in perfect rows. On the stage, set up under a huge tree, Liam, now 7 years old, nervously awaited his turn to receive his certificate from the first graduating class of the Blackwood Community School, the first of several educational projects Lily and Edward had developed together. The school was not just another educational institution. It was the materialization of a shared dream. Lily's social vision combined with Edward's resources and influence. It had started small, with only 2 classrooms, but had grown rapidly, becoming a reference in the region for its innovative and inclusive pedagogy. From the front row, Edward watched his son with undisguised pride. It wasn't just paternal pride for the intelligent and sensitive boy Liam had become, but also for everything they had built together as a family. Beside him, Lily held a 3-year-old girl, Grace, the newest member of the Summers Thorne family. Grace had her mother's blue eyes and her father's stubborn determination. From her first steps, she showed a strong personality that often made Liam, her protective older brother, roll his eyes with loving exasperation. "Daddy, look!" Grace whispered, pointing to the stage. "Liam's going to get an award." "A certificate, darling," Lily gently corrected. "Like the ones you get at ballet school." "A very important certificate," the girl emphasized, carefully pronouncing the new word. Edward smiled, marveling at children's ability to turn simple words into achievements. Watching his family, he felt that familiar wave of gratitude that had become a constant part of his life. 5 years ago, never could he have imagined he would be there, about to celebrate another family accomplishment that had nothing to do with corporate acquisitions or new ventures. His company continued to prosper, certainly, but now It had purpose beyond profit. Each new project incorporated social and educational elements, inspired by the work of the foundation that bore his son's name. Edward had become known not only as a successful businessman, but as an effective philanthropist, someone who used his resources to generate real impact. When Liam was finally called, he walked confidently to the center of the stage. Instead of just receiving his certificate and returning to his seat, he took the microphone, surprising everyone. "I want to thank my mom and dad," he said in his clear little voice. "They taught me that family isn't just about who's born together, but who chooses to stay together. And I also want to thank them for building this school so all kids can learn, even if their families don't have much money." Liam paused, taking a deep breath, as Lily had taught him to control nervousness. "My mom told me that when she was little, before my dad knew I existed, she was very scared she couldn't give me a good education. Now, thanks to them, many other moms don't have to have that fear. And that makes me want to help people when I grow up, just like them." There wasn't a dry eye in the audience when Liam finished his short, impromptu speech. Lily and Edward exchanged emotional glances, hands intertwined, while Grace tried to escape from her mother's lap to go hug her older brother. "He's so much like you," Edward whispered. "He has your heart," Lily replied, "and your eyes, and your ability to make me cry with just a few words," he added, discreetly wiping a tear. After the ceremony, while the children played on the school playground, Lily and Edward talked with other parents and teachers. The Liam Olson Thorne Educational Foundation had already inaugurated 3 similar schools in different underserved regions, each incorporating specific elements of local needs. "Your model is inspiring other entrepreneurs," one of the teachers commented. "Last week I got a call from a group in the South wanting to learn about our methodology. It's the ripple effect we hoped for," Lily replied with satisfaction. "Quality education shouldn't be a privilege, it should be a right." Edward, watching his wife speak passionately about the project, felt that familiar tightening in his chest, a mix of admiration, respect, and deep love. Lily had blossomed in recent years, finding her purpose as the foundation's educational director. Her work was nationally recognized, and recently she had been invited to participate in a governmental committee on inclusive education. "Daddy, Daddy!" Grace's voice interrupted his thoughts. The girl ran toward him, her dark curls bouncing. "Liam showed me how to climb the highest jungle gym. Come see." Picking up his daughter, Edward hoisted her onto his shoulders. "Let's go, princess, but remember rule number 1. Safety first," she completed promptly, already familiar with her father's mantra. Liam awaited them on the playground, proudly perched atop the structure. At 7 years old, he already showed Edward's natural leadership combined with Lily's empathy, a combination that made teachers predict great things for his future. "Look, Daddy, from here you can see the whole school," he exclaimed enthusiastically. "I see, champ. Impressive." Edward placed Grace on the ground, carefully supervising as she tried to follow her brother. "Careful, Liam. Help your sister." Watching his children interact, Liam patiently extending his hand to guide Grace, the determined girl trying to reach him, Edward felt a profound contentment. This was his true inheritance, far more valuable than any corporate empire. Compassionate children, aware of their privileges and determined to make a difference. Lily approached, hugging him around the waist, as she also watched the children. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, noticing his contemplative expression. "How I never imagined I could be so happy," he replied simply. "How my definition of success has completely changed." She smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "Mine too. Remember how I was afraid to accept your help at first? How determined I was to do everything alone? You were fiercely independent," he agreed with a smile. "Still are, actually. But I learned that accepting help doesn't mean weakness. It means multiplying possibilities." At that moment, Liam called them over to see something he had discovered, a small bird's nest in a nearby tree. The four gathered, observing the chicks chirp for food. "Look, Grace, it's a family like ours," Liam explained, with the seriousness of a teacher giving a lesson. "The mommy bird and the daddy bird take care of the baby birds. Together? They're happy?" Grace asked, with the curiosity typical of her age. "I think so," Liam replied thoughtfully. "They're together." Edward and Lily exchanged emotional glances over the children's heads. In those simple words, their son had captured the essence of what they had built together. A safe nest of love and mutual support, where each member could grow and flourish. Later that day, back home, after the children were asleep, Edward found Lily in the office, reviewing some documents for the Foundation's next school. "Shouldn't you be resting? It was a busy day," he commented, gently massaging her tense shoulders. "Just finishing some details," she replied, leaning into his touch. "The inauguration is in 3 weeks." Edward observed the plans spread on the table. Architectural blueprints, pedagogical projects, carefully crafted budgets. It was the Foundation's 4th educational center, and each one became more comprehensive than the last. "You're building an incredible legacy," he said with admiration. "Much bigger than anything I've ever built." Lily turned to face him. "We're building it together, Edward. Every brick, every idea, every dream realized. We did it together." He nodded, extending a hand to help her up. "Come, I want to show you something." He led her to the garden, where the moonlight bathed the trees they had planted when they moved in. Under the largest one, where they had married 5 years earlier, Edward had placed a small wooden bench with an engraved plaque. Lily approached to read the inscription by moonlight. "To Lily, who taught me that true wealth is not in bank accounts, but in the hearts we touch. With all my love, today and always, Edward." "Happy 5th anniversary," he said softly. "It feels like yesterday we promised to build a life together, right here." Lily touched the plaque with her fingers, deeply moved. "The best decision I ever made," she whispered. They sat together on the bench, watching the starry sky, hands intertwined as on their first day. The path they had walked had been far from easy. They had their challenges, their arguments, moments of doubt. But every obstacle overcome only strengthened the bonds that united them. "You know what Liam asked me the other day?" Lily commented. "He wanted to know if I ever regretted being a single mother at the beginning. If it would have been easier if we had been together from the start." "And what did you answer?" "That every path has its purpose. That year alone taught me a strength I didn't know I possessed. And that perhaps we needed that time apart to truly value what we have now." Edward reflected on her words, recognizing the wisdom in them. "And you?" she asked. "Do you regret anything?" "Only not having known Liam from day one," he replied honestly. "Of having missed his first moments. But maybe I wasn't ready to be the father he deserved if we had taken a different path." They fell silent for a few minutes, contemplating the stars and the journey that had brought them there. The gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the tree under which they had exchanged vows, like a whisper of approval. "Sometimes I think about what would have happened if we hadn't met again at that school," Edward mused. "If fate hadn't conspired in our favor, I would have—" He didn't need to finish the sentence. Both knew. He would have continued his life of material success, but forever adrift, unaware of the profound joy and purpose that awaited him. And Lily would have continued to be strong, resourceful, but perhaps carrying a quiet loneliness. But fate and a child's green eyes had brought them together. And in their shared life, they found a happiness that transcended the simple narrative of a rich man and a humble woman. It was a story of two souls, once adrift, finding their true north in each other and in the family they built on a foundation of love, respect, and shared purpose. A love story unscripted, yet perfectly orchestrated by the hand of destiny. Your interactions are very important to us. Leave your name in the comments, and we can include it in one of our stories with a special shout out to you.